This is a Zeiss Convergent binocular head, and sometimes the ear tab gets bent out of shape. That's because, one reason is because the grease in your pivoting barrels has gotten old, and it's very sluggish and hard to open, and so a lot of pressure is put on these two sides, and uneven pressure, and it opens up the ear. That should be tight. The tab and the ear should not have any play. They should be very close. And as you can see, there's a lot of room. So when you're pulling open the binoculars, they're not even. So yeah, for a temporary fix, you could probably push that, bend it in. But if you haven't addressed the reason why that's happening, it's just going to happen again. So we're going to take these apart, out, clean the pivot barrels and re-grease them, and then bend our ear tab, the ear socket, bend it tight, and put them back in. So you have to take out the eyepieces first. And we'll take out these screws on both sides. Once we've taken off the screws, you can take the covers off. Try not to touch your prisms. And inside here are the two safety screws that we'll have to remove those. Once I've removed the safety screws, I'm actually going to put the covers back on to protect the prisms from touching them. So I'm going to put the covers back on, and I'm going to go ahead and put a screw, one or two in each one. With a screw in the covers protecting the prisms, now I can handle them more easily, and ideally they should come off together at the same time. When you're putting them back on, you may have to do that. You may have to put them both on at the same time because there's just a little bit of clearance. But if you look at it, it looks as though we'll be able to pull this side off first, because it looks as though there's clearance of the ears, so I can pull this side off and then pull that one off second. I can't pull this side off because it's got the ear, it's got the tab, it's got the tab, and it looks like it's further in here, so it's not going to come up. So this side, I'm going to pull that up first. And when I pull it, I'm just going to be rocking it as I'm pulling it. And depending on how stiff that is, it may be hard or easier. So hopefully we won't bend our pivot barrels inside. So I'm not going to turn it a lot, because if I do, then the ear is going to go back into here. So I've got to just slowly pull it out and see if I can clear that other housing. Okay, we were able to that time. But you might not have been able to do that, so you would have to have pulled off each one at a time a little bit, and then the other side a little bit, and pull them out together because there's not enough clearance to get it out. Okay, so we pull this one out, and this is really the culprit. As you can see, it should be following this rounded edge, but it's been pushed out, and you can see how it's thin, how thin it is. And this is just aluminum, so it can bend easily. So you want to be careful about bending it back up. And what we're going to do is clean these barrels. You can see there's some abnormal wear on this barrel because perhaps the grease perhaps it wasn't greased well, or it rubbed off, or whatever. I don't know. But we're gonna clean it and re-lube it with some number 4 hog strike grease. It's a real thick viscosity grease. You want a thick viscosity because you want some pressure, some tension on those eyepieces, those eye housings, so that it doesn't open up real easily. So you're going to need some thick grease if you got it. And we'll go ahead and take this one off too. Okay. So we'll clean both of these, and we'll clean the inside of the housings, and we're going to use something like this to clean them. When you're cleaning everything, try not to soil the lenses inside there. If you do, you'll have to clean those also with some Windex and cotton swabs to clean those. But this is what we're going to have to address. And as you look at this, you can see how this follows the circle. And so we need to do, this arm should look very similar. It follows that established circle. If it's bent too far in, you have to be careful, because then it'll start digging into our pivot barrels. So we don't want to do that. We want to try to keep it even, the edges even all the way around. So one way to bend this, it's aluminum. One way to do it is we're going to push down right on that tip so that we're pushing that way. That way. We're going to push down. So I'm going to get a hard surface. And we'll see what happens. We want to be careful that we don't do it too much, but then we can always bend it out. But you don't want to be bending them back and forth too much, because it's going to weaken that piece. So I'm going to apply some pressure right there. You can see it's kind of moving in. Getting closer. That looks pretty close. But now we're going to check it. Check it with the socket with the ear to make sure, to verify how much space we have. And we've still got a little space in here. So we're going to bend it a little bit more. Make sure we're going in here. Just going to bend it just a little bit more. Be careful. Because I can still see a little bit of rim there, so I know I can come in just a little bit more. That looks like I've closed it. Now let's check it. Yeah, too tight. Now that's a nice fit. They're not going to be moving that much, just like that, just that much. So we're going to call that as good, and hopefully I didn't push it too far in. Here, I want to be careful. If they won't go in unless I push hard, that might be a little tight. So maybe I can push it out just a little bit, put a little bit of pressure on it. Okay, I'm going to call that good. We're going to put some, we're going to look at the slits to see if they're similar consistency. So one side goes in easily, the other side is a little tight on that side. That one goes in easily, and that goes in easily. But this one is a little bit tight, so it's possible that it's bent a little bit. I'm going to try to put a little pressure on it. Get my blade in there. And try to put a little bit of torque on it to open it up. Okay. We're going to call that good. We're going to put some number 4 grease, really thick. And we're not going to put much at all, okay? Because it will spread. We only need a thin, very, very thin, like a spider web depth. Okay, I'm going to put that on. And I'm just going to go all the way around and spread it. You just need a little bit, and I'm just going to keep spreading what I've already put on there because I don't want to put any more on there. I just need just a slight coating. If I have too much, when I push on the assembly, it's going to come out on the end. So I don't need much at all. Just enough to cover it. I'm just going to keep spreading what I've put on already. I'm not going to put any more on. I'm just going to keep spreading what I've got. Because the grease is so thick. And you may not have this type of grease, this viscosity, and yours might be thinner. And well, you just have to do what you've got. But the thicker the viscosity, the more tension you will have, and you need a little bit of tension. Okay, I'm going to keep doing that, finish that, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm not going to put any in here because I'm just going to push. I'm not going to put any in here. So I'm just going to push them on and let this side have the grease. Now that I've greased the pivot barrels with the same amount of grease all the way around, spread it out, what we're going to do is, first of all, just put on each side by itself just to make sure it goes in, and we're just going to give this one a little run. And while we're doing that, we're going to be putting grease on the inside here. We don't put it on, have to put it on now because it's just going to push it all into the lens. So we're leaving it dry, but we're going to push on here. This has the grease. We're just going to give this a little dry run to make sure it fits on and it's turning, and we didn't squeeze our socket too much. Okay, that fits on pretty good. Now we're going to take it off. And do the other side. Make sure it goes on smoothly. As you can tell, as I'm pushing it, I'm pushing excess grease. That's why you don't want a lot of grease in there. Just enough to barely coat it. Okay, now we have that one on. So we're going to try just leaving this one on because that's how we took the other one off, and there seemed to be enough space for the socket to clear the housing of this assembly. We're going to see if we can get it, but you may have to put them on both on at the same time. We're going to try this one. Okay, we're getting closer. There, I'm going to try to line it up so it's going to miss the housing and go right on the socket. I don't want to turn this too much and push the ear that way, or too far this way and pull the ear out. So I want to get that ear so it's going straight in and aligning up with the socket. Sort of like the space shuttle docking into the International Space Station. Same principle. Going in, docking, pushed in. Okay, looks like we're in. And we look at our space. The space looks good now. When we open, everything is nice and smooth and tight. Okay, now we're going to take our screws back out, our covers out, so we can put our safety screws back in. Take our screws out. Now we can take our covers out. Be careful not to touch the prism glass. And now we reinsert our safety screws in there. Okay, we have our safety screws back in, and now is a good time to check your prism surfaces to make sure they're clean. If you want to use a light and examine them. If you have any dust, you might want to blow them off. And then we put our covers back on. And our screws back in. With our screws back in, both covers, we can reinsert our eyepieces. And reinstall it back on the slit lamp and check it. So we're looking at our gap. We open it up. It's smooth. There's not a lot of gap in here, so there's no jerkiness. And we have the right grease in there. We have the right tension. And that will last longer than if we had just tried to bend that socket closed and just called it good. Then it wouldn't have been long before it would have happened again. And the more times you bend one way or the other, it gets weaker. So you want to do it right the first time. So this happens a lot on the Convergent, especially when the grease gets old and they're not used very often. If the doctor doesn't open up his binoculars often, then it just kind of stays in one place and the grease gets a little stiffer than if they're moved often. So hopefully that will be all you need. I just wanted to show you that on the parallel head it's very similar to the Convergent, except to take these off you're going to probably have to take them both off at the same time. There's not as much room in here, and so you can't pull one off first and pull them. You need to pull them both together. So after you take your screws off and your safety screws out, then you can put your covers back on. Put a screw to hold them. A screw to hold the covers back on so you can handle it. And then you need to pull them both together at the same time. if you're able to. Same thing. You need to bend back in to make it tight. These are okay, but I was just showing you how to take it apart. And then when it's time to put it back in, after you've cleaned it, re-greased it, you're probably going to have to put them back on when they're in the position where they're already locked together. So you line them up. Put them together and then go down. And go down together. It's a little harder because you've got to do both of them together, but that's what you're going to have to do, and gently turn and push as you're going down until it goes down then, and then once again take your covers back off. Put your safety screws back in. And then reinsert your covers and put the screws on. So I just wanted to show you the difference between the parallel and the convergent. Very similar, but to take these prism assemblies on and off, you're probably going to have to do them at the same time together.